Okay, welcome everyone. As we welcome in Shalom Fogel, we welcome in Ruben Pollack, Marshall Castle, Gedalia Engels, Shimon Klein, Dr. Guy, Michal, Dr. Black, Shelley Zeitlin, Saba, Yitzi Fuchs, Irving Fishbaum, Mel Zachter, Stephen Holtzman, Rabbi Kranz, Nachman Chapler, Ilya Shutman, Naftali Jablin, Avram Rezepkowitz, Yitzi Muller, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, and David Helfgott on Kol HaLashon. Here in the shul, we have the pleasure of having Barish Gesseman. We have Reb Kramer, Michal Avram, and Reuven Shanet. I don't see yet Menachem Yemansky, so let's continue to learn from him. I hope he's feeling better. Menachem Leibish Ben Sarah. We welcome in Eba Arbach. Also, our Bava Basra Daf, Rich Lenner, has some kind of a virus, so he's under the weather. We are sponsored by Shalom Fogel, Lui Nishmas, Yaakov Zev ben Yehuda Aryeh, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam Bas Gad, and Yosef ben Sion ben Yaakov Zev, by Baruch Ian, Lui Nishmas, Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther Bas Gittel, Avram ben Shmuel HaKohen, by Yaakov Yemansky, with a Karsotov to the Rav and the Zoom family, and Nachas from children and grandchildren, A.B. Spry, Nachas from children and grandchildren, as Salah from London, and Joshua Rosenberg, a virtual Talmud. We are holding on the bottom of Daf Kuf Gimel Amid Beis. So we said that if I said to Marshall, I'm selling you a base kur, Mida Bechevel, measured by a rope, then I got to give him an exact base kur. If I say base kur, hein chaser, hein yeser, whether a little less, whether a little more, then I could give him, even if it's less or more, a roiva of a kav per sa, which equals amount of 7.5 kav. What if I didn't say mida bechevel? What if I didn't say hein chaser, hein yeser? I just said base kur. So that's the Gemara Shaila. Iboyelu base kur stomamai. If I just said to him, I'm selling you a base kur without any elaboration. I didn't say mida bechevel, and I didn't say hein chaser, hein yeser. So the Gemara is going to try to bring a raya from the Mishnah, but we'll see that the Mishnah has contradictory implications, and you can't bring a raya from the Mishnah. As the Gemara presents, Tajma, it says in the Mishnah, if I say measured by the rope, so pichas kolshu, if I gave him a little less, yanaka, I have to deduct from the price, yes, kolshu. If I gave him a little more, yachzer, he has to give it back to me. Hostama, but if I didn't say mida bechevel, so then it's kain chaser and yeser dami. It's as if I said a little less or a little more, and I have a leeway of 7.5 kav, rova kav per sa. Says, well, from the latter part of the Mishnah, it's mashma the other way around. If I say a little less or a little more, then I feel a pichas rivalasa, even if I gave him less, a quarter a kav per sa, or more, a quarter a kav per sa, the deal goes through. Mashma only because I said hein chasav hein yeser. Hostama, but if I just said a base kurstam, it's kamida bechevel dami, and I have to give him the exact amount. And therefore, since it's contradictory implications, we can't derive anything conclusive from the Mishnah. But Tajma, base kur offer ani meichelach. If I tell Marshall, I'm selling you a base kur of offer, or base kur offer ani meichelach, or around the base kur of offer, or hein chas or hein yeser, or a little less or a little more ani meichelach, then all three of these l'shainis, afilu pichas roi v'lasa, even if I gave him less, a quarter of a cup per sa, oh ha'isa roi v'lasa, I gave him more, a quarter of a cup per sa, he giu. So we see the first case is base kuraf ani meichalach. Still, we have leeway. So alma stama nami, even if I just say base kuraf, since I didn't say mida bechevel, kehein chaser ein yeser nami. So the Gemara says, well, that's not conclusive. Maybe we should read it as follows. Hasim Perushe Kamafarish. Ezo Beis Kur. What language where I say I'm selling him a Beis Kur is Beis Kur, is around the Beis Kur and not exact. Where I say a little less or a little more. But there's no proof what if I just said Beis Kurah for Ani Meichalach. However, the Gemara doesn't like that pshat, because if it's really only telling us the language of Hein Chaser, Hein Yaser, then why does it have to say Ani Meichalach so many times? Rather, it's telling us three Lashonos. Whether I said Beis Kur offer Ani Meichalach, whether I said Ki Beis Kur offer Ani Meichalach, whether I said Beis Kur Hein Chaser, Hein Yeser, in all three of these languages, I leave myself leeway. Elulav Shmamina Stama Nami, if I say the first language of the three, Beis Kur offer Ani Meichalach, Stama, Kehein Chaser, Hein Yeser Dami, it's as if I said a little less or a little more, and either of us has to accept an overture or an underture. I don't know if there's such a word as underture. There probably isn't. An overture or less than a quarter a kav per sa, 7.5 kav per sa. Shmamina. That's a good proof. Right. That's a good proof.
It's overage.
Underage?
Overage.
No, overage I know, but how do you say the under?
An underage.
I don't know if there's such a word as underage. Yeah.
Sure.
Underture is actually a song.
You said the word, so now it's a new thing.
Right. My father's Rav, Olav Hashem, Rav Singer of the Sradish Shul, he had an amazing vocabulary. And my father, Olav Hashem, also had a very good vocabulary. And I remember he once asked Rav Singer, after a drasha, he listened to Rav Singer's drashas very attentively, and he asked Rav Singer, is there such a word? So Rav Singer said, Heshi, I made it up. But I challenge anybody to challenge me. But I made it up. It's interesting because I remember Rav Miller using Chitzonios ma'oros es hapnimios, and he said our exteriority affects our interiority, and I'm not sure if there's such a word as interiority. Is there such a word?
Interior artery.
It made the point.
Huh? So anyway,
There's no such word.
right. So I'm saying, so.
You're not supposed to argue.
Yeah, but Ramilla made the word. Who do you go with, Webster or Miller?
Deficiency, undersupply, insufficiency, deficit.
Yeah. Okay, we know all those words. Those aren't fun.
Undersupply.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Now. A thesaurus is for wimps. Says the Gemara, Shali, how often do I use a thesaurus?
You don't, but I do.
Is that a form of
Thesaurus is a dinosaur. A thesaurus is the book.
Now, Marshall, you know what I always say? It takes one to know one. Now, in the case where I sell to Marshall occur, I said hein chaser, hein yeser, but it's more than a quarter of a kav per sa. I gave him a quarter of a kav per sa is 7.5 kav. I gave him 8 kav. So Marshall has to refund me the extra. And the Mishnah says, what does he have to refund me? He has to refund me the money. Not give me back the 8 kav, because giving me back the 8 kav, I won't have anything to do with it, because it's too small of an area, because we'll see that the minimum area to cultivate is 9 kav. So therefore we make him refund me the money and not the 8 kav. And the assumption is that that is for the betterment of the seller. And that's what the Gemara says. It seems to be from our Mishnah that we're interested to strengthen the power of the seller. But we're not interested in giving, understandably, we're not interested in giving any strength to marshal the buyer. Says the Gemara, but Vatanya, Pichas Shiva Kavan Machsa, if the differential is less than 7.5 kav liquor, or Heiser Shiva Kavan Machsa liquor, or the differential is more 7.5 kavan liquor, which is the amount of mechila higiyu, then it's just accepted, where we say hein chosev hein yeser, or base kur stama. Yoiser mekan, but if I gave him more than 7.5 kav, I gave him 8 kav, koifen es hamoicher limkar, we force me to sell it to him. In other words, I can't ask for the land back. And we make the buyer take it. So it seems to be that we also put a burden on the seller that he has to give him the land. Says, well, no, that's not what it means. The seller has the right to get back the 8 kav. Just we give him the benefit and say that Marshall should give him the money, because what is he going to do with 8 kav, which is not a cultivatable area? But Hasam, there it's talking about, remember, Marshall now is being imposed upon. He was sold, he asked to buy a kur. Now he's getting 8 kav extra, and we're making him pay for it. So Hasam, Kigaindu Yakira Meikara, where these 8 kav were $300 initially, Vizol Hashta, and now when it comes for Marshall paying for it, it's worth $250. Daminolay, Marshall could say, obviously, if you're making me take the 8 extra kav, hovli kizulo dahashta. Give it to me, but give it to me according to the lower rate now. And therefore, that's the meaning that we force the meicher to sell it, and that is we force him to give him the lower rate now. So the Gemara says, but Tani will into the Braisa kishu noisin loy, that when he gives it to him, noisin loy kishar shelokach mimenu, Marshall gives it according to the price of how it was when he made the deal. So the Gemara says, again, that's for the benefit of Marshall. What's that? If it was cheap, it was $250 originally, those 8 kav, and now it went up to $300, again, Marshall says, look, you're imposing me to pay for the overture, you're imposing me to pay for the 8 kav, going to have a Zula Meikara. It was cheap at the beginning when they made the deal, $250 the 8 kav. V'yakula hashtan, it's now $300. Again, Marshall says, look, I didn't want these extra 8 kav. If I have to pay it, I'm not paying you according to the inflated price now, but only the lower price when I bought it. So either way, we make it fair for Marshall, surprisingly enough. Now, She'im shayir b'soda base tes kavin. The Mishnah says, however, if the overture is 9 kav, then Marshall could say, take it back. He doesn't have to pay me for it, because 9 kav already is a cultivatable sada. 9 kav is already a piece of land. It's a chaticha ruya liskabet. It's something that's worthy in itself, and therefore he could tell me, Rabbi Weiss, take it back. It's extra, take it back. Now here's the question. Is that tes kavin per kur? In other words, if let's say I sold them 2 kur, do we say that they're up to 15 kav there's mechila? 7.5 kav per kur. So that means up to 15 kav there's mechila. Or do we say by 2 kur, if there's tisha kavin, there's never mechila, because that's already a distinct piece of land. Nobody is meichel that. So Amar Rav Huna, tes kavin she'amru, the 9 kav that we say that he has to return to me, that's afilu b'bika g'dayla. Even if I sell him a large valley of many kurin, if the overture is 9 kav, there's no mechila on 9 kav. 9 kav is a field of itself. Rav Nachman says no. Rav Nachman no. Noisa shiva kavan or machza l'kol kur v'kur. There's mechila of 7.5 kav of a rova per sa for every kur. So therefore, if I sell him 2 kur, if the differential is 7.5 kav per kur or 15 kav, there's mechila. It's only if it's more than 7.5 kav per each kur, and that's what Rav Nachman says. Rav Nachman shiva kavan or machza l'kol kur v'kur. There's an allowance of 7.5 kavin per each kur. So therefore, if the overture was 15 kav, I can't ask Marshall for it back. So the Gemara asks on Rav Nachman, however, v'i'i kamilsa yisera, if let's say the sale is 1 kur, and there is an overture Letitia Kavin of 9 kav, so then I can't ask Marshall to pay me for the 9 kav. Then Hadre, then he has to return it. That everybody holds like that. Now, so Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. So Rava asked Rav Nachman, and by the way, Marshall just sent me a text that later tonight, if anybody wants to tune in, he will do the Rajbamas for you.
Talk about a big one.
Yeah. So anyway, and Marshall says that if he gets 50 Zoomers for that, he's going to send out bourbons for everybody. Now. Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. So Rava asks Rav Nachman, She'im shayir b'soda beis tisha kavin, because if there's extra 9 kav, then Marshall has to return it to me. Now Rava says, isn't that talking about even where it's a sale of 2 kur, lav de zavan like kurayim? And yet we see that if it's 9 kav, there's never mechila. So the Gemara says, "Loi, there's zavan like kur." Now the Mishnah says, "Ubegina beis chatzi kav." In a garden, if there's an overture of a half a kav, that is already a cultivatable area, and that's already a cultivatable area, and I have to take it back. I can't ask Marshall to pay for it, and there's no mechila on that. So the Gemara says, remember, there is mechila of a quarter of a kav per sa. Now it seems to be that it says over here, if there's a half a kav, then there's no mechila. So the Gemara says, doesn't this imply even if I sold Marshall 2 sa? So where I sold Marshall 2 sa, the regular rate of mechila would be a quarter a kav per sa, and therefore it should be mechila. But since it's a kosh of a share of a garden, a garden is already cultivatable when it's a half a kav, he has to return it. So lav de zoven le sasayin says loy de zoven le sa. It's talking about where I sold to Marshall a sa. So where I sold to Marshall a sa, the mechila is a quarter of a kav. If it's a share of a half a kav, which is a garden of itself, then he has to return it to me. Now it says, Ukediver Rabbi Akiva Beis Roiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, the share of a garden is a quarter of a kav. So my lav de zoven le sa, isn't it talking about where I sold him a sa? So although normally the mechila is a roiva kav, but since it's a share of a garden, he has to return it to me. Says the Gemara, loy, the zoven le chatzi sa. I sold him a half a sa. So there, by a half a sa, the share of mechila, since for a sa it's a roiva kav, by a half a sa, the share of mechila is an eighth of a kav. If, however, the overture is a quarter of a kav, then he has to return it. Now, asks Rav Ashi, by Rav Ashi, Soda v'nasagina, if when I sold it to him, it was a field, but it got converted to a garden, or Gina, I sold it to him, it was a garden, v'nasa soda, and it got converted to a field, Mai, do we go according to the time of sale? And if at the time of the sale it was a field, then the shear is Tisha Kavin, or do we say that we go according to the time of the when it's measured by the purchaser, and if then already it's a garden, so then the shear would be a half a kav or a quarter of a kav. Says the Gemara, take tishbi ataretz kushas b'bayis. Now, let's put Gedalia on mute. Although we never want to mute Gedalia. Shelley, maybe send out a little note to Menachem Yemansky that we're all missing him and wishing him well. Now, Tana. Here's an interesting thing. Remember, we say that if there's an overture of more than 7.5 kav, then Marshall has to pay me the money and can't return it to me, because what am I going to do with 7.5 kav? That's too small for me to cultivate. However, Tana, we learned in the Braisa, im hoya samach l'sadeyu, if the field that I sold Marshall is near another field of mine, so that if the overture is, let's say, 7 3/4 of a calf, so he has to return it to me. There he could say, Rabbi Weiss, I'm not paying you for the 7 3/4. I'll return it to you because it's right next to your other field. Then I feel a kolshu mazel like karka. Then if it's even a little bit more, it doesn't have to be 9 kav, because even the 7 3/4 kav is next to my other field, so it combined, it's going to be cultivatable. So the Gemara says, Boy Rav Ashi bar mao shetafsik. Let's say it's next to my field, but there's a pit dividing it from the overture from the rest of my field. Or amasamayim mao shetafsik. What if there's a irrigation canal between the overture and the rest of my field? Derech harabim mao shetafsik. Or there's a 16 amas public path in between. Or richba de dikla mao. Or there's a hedge of palm trees mao shetafsik. Could I say, Marshall, you want to return me the 7 3/4? The 7 3/4 is not going to be next to my other field because there's these things in the way. So it's not a cultivatable area, and therefore return me the money. So the Gemara says whether he's allowed to do this, teiku tishbi atarz kushis v'bayis. Now, if you remember, I told you that the language of the Mishnah is not precise. It needs to be amended. When I taught the Mishnah, I already told you this. Let me remind you. If, let's say, we said that if the overture was 7.5 kav, then Marshall doesn't have to pay for it. Because he's allowed, there's mechila of 1/4 of a kav per sa, or in a kur of 30 sa, 7.5 kav. However, if the overture is 8 kav, then he doesn't have to pay just for the half a kav, but then he has to pay for all 8 kav, because there's no mechila. Now the Mishnah says, it's not just 1/4 of a calves that he has to return, rather all of the extra. Now, the Chiddush is the other way around, that it's not just the extra half a calf, because when it's 8 calf, Mechila would have been 7.5, so it's not just the extra half a kav, but also all the other rivers he has to return. And that's what the Gemara says, klapa ilaya, just the opposite. Klapa ilaya means towards the tail. In other words, adarabba, just the opposite. And the Gemara says, you're right. You have to amend the Mishnah. Tani Ravin Barav Nachman, loya samoisa bilvad ma'azalai. If there was mechila of 7.5 and the overture is 8, he doesn't only have to return me the extra half a kav, ls kola ravan kulan, he has to return me all the roiva kavs as well, the full 7.5 kavs as well as that extra half kav, because now there's no mechila on anything. Okay, Rabbi say I did the Mishnah Yomis already, because now, as Michal Avram is going to bring me the green screen, we have a delicious chok to learn.